Hey, everybody. Guy Haberman and David Lombardi here with our 49ers offense preview for camp. We also have a defensive preview. And we're going to go position by position, group by group for David when the Niners vets report July 23rd. They'll throw pads on maybe the next week. And the way we're approaching this is just what are the big storylines? What are the big position battles? What are the things that when we go out there that we're watching for at the top of our list?
And it's fun because this offensive side of the ball, this is where the 49ers were at the top of the league last season. And the question is, how can they take that extra step, go that extra mile to get a little bit better? Because ultimately they only scored, 19 points in regulation there against the Kansas City Chiefs. So the offense needs to be a little bit better in crunch time. And I think that everybody points to the offensive line, right, as being a weak spot during that Super Bowl. But there was another problem for the 49ers, and it was the lack of separation that they got with their wide receivers in the Super Bowl. They also had a fumble from Christian McCaffrey early in the game. So they didn't play a perfect Super Bowl by any stretch on the offensive side of the ball. I think that was reflected in the scoring output. And, when we break this down position by position, I think it'll be cool to do it through a lens of, okay, how have they gotten better or how have they tried to get better at each of these position groups?
And I would say, I'm going to include special teams in this, albeit briefly. They made a mistake on special teams as well in the Super Bowl.
Huge.
And it wasn't Ray McCloud's mistake, but they are replacing Ray McCloud. And, I think any offensive coach like Kyle Shanahan, they would love if you could just skip the special teams part of the game. Maybe not any offensive coach, but a lot of offensive coaches would just say, forget about the possibility that my team is going to lose the ball on this punt return and just give me the ball at the 25-yard line. They don't get to do that. So for that reason, I think we should put special teams on the offensive side of the ball, at least special team return, which is what we're really talking about here. You mentioned offensive line. I think that's a good place to start because, you could argue, I think, that there's two question marks here. Trent Williams solidified at left tackle. I do think right tackle is solidified with Colton McKivitz. I think Banks at left guard is solidified. And so center and right guard is where I see the biggest questions here. Do you agree with that premise?
Yeah, and you could see that I've got Jake Brendel highlighted in that pink color that denotes a player dealing with an injury. We didn't see him during the spring. He's got knee tendonitis. And he also regressed performance-wise in 2023 versus his first year starting in 2022 when he actually scored as a top 5 pass blocker at center. Wasn't the case his second year. And I think that the interior of the 49ers line was a particularly big problem in the Super Bowl. The fact that Brendel was dealing with knee tendonitis and might still be is an issue to keep an eye out for. And we could just kind of read the tea leaves of the offseason. The 49ers made a lot of interior offensive line moves. Essentially every single player that they picked up, every single rookie that they picked up has some center adaptability. Dominic Pooney, for example, the 3rd-round draft pick who played tackle at Kansas, but is a guy that probably can play all 5 spots. He played a lot of center at the Senior Bowl. He also filled in during Kansas's spring game there. Drake Nugent out of Michigan. He's all Big Ten center. Bryson Mays, Southern Mississippi. Very fast center, can move. And Jarrett Kingston, he's played tackle and he's played guard. But I also think anybody who you look at as a guard and they're looking at Kingston as an interior lineman, you might be able to flex to center as well. The veteran who they picked up last year, Ben Barch, has already been playing center for them over the course of the spring practices. So the 49ers are obviously gearing up to replenish at that all-important center position. And I think it works in conjunction with right guard, which is the spot that had maybe the most glaring offensive mistake in the Super Bowl when Spencer Burford didn't block Chris Jones. John Feliciano is probably the favorite to start at right guard, but he is a player with a lot of starting experience in his career at center as well. So he's also in the mix for that center position. I don't know exactly how they're going to make this work, shuffle this if Jake Brendel isn't healthy enough to play at the start of the season. We don't have a lot of information on that right now. So a lot of change could be possible for the 49ers.
Well, and if it's knee tendonitis, which it is, just because Jake Brendel is available one day doesn't mean he's available a day 2 weeks later, right? So I think the Niners need to have an alternative, understanding that they'll probably need to use it, even if they reach a point where Jake Brendel is back and starting at center for them. And it feels like, in a weird way, and this is not comfortable, that Dominic Pooney is kind of a linchpin for them, right? Can he solve their problem at right guard? Can he help solve their problem at center? He's a third-round pick. That means they value him, but that's a lot to put on a rookie offensive lineman, especially, well, in any offense. That's a lot to put on him. I think there's a lot of people who put a lot of hopes on Dominic Pooney right now, hoping he can solve a few different, or one of a couple different problems for the 49ers.
You're right in that he's in a tough spot where they're going to need some immediate production. And that doesn't mean he doesn't have to be a starter from day one, but you're going to need, in that first year, you're going to need more than 5 offensive linemen. You always do. If you want to win a Super Bowl in these long seasons, my magic number had always been 8, but I think that 7 might be acceptable. And that's 7 quality offensive linemen, because guys are going to get dinged up. You're going to have relievers, and you can't let the performance just fall off of a cliff when guys do get hurt. But it was obvious that they needed to improve the offensive line this offseason. It was less obvious how they should do so, because they didn't pick until late in the first round. The plus tackles were all off the board by the time that the 49ers did pick. So they obviously went Ricky Pearsall in that first round. Now, that's a whole separate argument. I do think if you have better separators at the receiver position, you make your offensive line look better. That's obviously the 49ers philosophy. So, somebody like Pearsall, and just improving your weapons in general, and making sure your quarterback, like Brock Purdy, stays healthy and stays as quick as fast of a processor as he is,
right,
that's going to help your offensive line. So that all works hand in hand. But as far as improving the line itself, they didn't really find a sweet spot to be able to do so until that Dominic Pooney pick in the 3rd round. And one thing they really like about him, and I talked to Lance Leopold, that was his head coach at Kansas, is that they saw him make the jump from D2 football at Central Missouri to Kansas. He transferred to Kansas, which is obviously a D1 school, and he was excellent right out of the gate. I mean, that's a big jump, and it's going to be an even bigger jump now going from Kansas to the NFL. But the fact that this guy has already made that jump once, that, very daunting jump once, I think gives the 49ers some level of confidence that he's got what it takes to make something like that again. And one other thing is that he is very clearly a better pass protector than a run blocker, which marks a big change for the 49ers in terms of their focus along the offensive line. In the past, their higher picks along the line, and this goes back to Mike McGlinchey in 2018, had been very clearly better run blockers than pass protectors. But I think we've entered a new era here with Brock Purdy as the quarterback, with the pass game being the side of the ball the 49ers featured much more in the postseason last year. I think that this new era means that the 49ers have adjusting priorities as far as team construction goes. And they definitely went for a guy who, he didn't give up a single sack in 2 years at Kansas after he transferred from Central Missouri. That's why they went with Dominic Pooney, because they're really focusing on pass protection.
Anything else on the offensive line?
Well, here, let's pop it open one more time.
By the way, if you're watching or listening, David has a Google sheet that is the Niners 90-man depth chart. The link for that is in the description of however you're consuming this. So,
yeah, well, just click on it and you could follow along here. Hopefully, those of you watching, hopefully this is in crystal clear HD so you can read this. But you can see Pooney here, and I know I have him behind Banks at left guard. It's way more likely that he first sees the field at right guard. I just don't know what the health of these guys is going to be at the start of camp.
God, this is it's going to be so complicated, right? There's not any indication. There's no reason to think that the rotation at right guard won't continue.
I think we got to figure out center, right? We'll be analyzing it. Once we figure out center, our spreadsheet's going to look a lot more predictive of what's going on.
Our spreadsheet. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm giving you some ownership here, so you could take it or leave it. You like the spreadsheet, don't you? Do you use it on your shows? I hope you do. Or
I do like the spreadsheet. I use a depth.
Oh,
I use an actual. I have a in terms of formational depth chart that I take out to the field with me. And I print out a new one for every practice, and I am making like what to watch for notes on it and that sort of thing. And it's on cardboard, so I can write on it.
It's almost like you're a play-by-play broader.
Well, it is actually. It's from that.
It's a
kind
chart.
of just it helps exactly. It's a chart. It helps. Although when I call a game, I numerically organize my chart, and when I go to a practice, I actually organize it by positionally, like the way everything's set up on the field. So, the brain works differently for different situations. But
you know what we need to talk about before we skip forward here to the next position is swing tackle, because that's changed this year. And they brought in two. You could see the teal in this chart, by the way. Those are free agent acquisitions. They brought in two veterans who have both delivered some good football over the course of their careers. Chris Hubbard is an older player, and he's dealt with injuries over the past couple of years. But whenever he's been healthy, he's been able to actually still pass protect well. So that is a good depth option for the 49ers, I think, for a shorter period of time. He just hasn't shown in a few years that he could play a full 17-game season. Another guy who, this was a third-round pick of the Raiders a few years back, has also dealt with a lot of injuries, but when he was healthy earlier in his career, was a good player, Brandon Parker. So you've got Parker, Hubbard, and Jalen Moore as your potential swing tackle options behind Colton McKivitz, who's entering his second year starting at right tackle. They think that McKivitz can make a nice jump just because that was just his first year starting last year. But regardless of whether or not he makes the jump, you do have to have good backstop options here, because Trent Williams, he could go down for a game or two. You don't want him to go down for longer than that, obviously, but you better have somebody that can fill in. So I'm really interested to see who makes this roster at that position.
All right, I'm going to take us to quarterback next. And, in terms of what to quote unquote, what to watch for, there's not a ton with Brock, although
you say that again.
What to watch for. That's my ESPN voiceover guy voice.
They're going to have AI that can deliver that.
Have you seen the AI for the Al Michaels AI?
I saw the headline.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it yet, but I guess they haven't released it yet.
They just released some clips, but it's personalized.
Does it sound good?
Highlights of the Olympics using AI. Al Michaels' real voice is what fed the engine, but then they recreate Al's making, doing highlight recaps. It sounds like Al. For the second year in a row, the 49ers have a quarterback competition for QB2. That's what was happening last year, and it's what's happening this year. And, I think the question is just, we all know how smart Josh Dobbs is. Do the 40 days between minicamp and the open of training camp give him enough time to catch up offensively with the guy he's competing with for the backup quarterback job, Brandon Allen, right? Brandon Allen has so much experience in this offense, was with the Niners last year, was with Zach Taylor and the Bengals, was with Sean McVay and the Rams. So does that give him enough time? And then the other thing I would say, even though I don't think we're going to see Brock Purdy part 2, because of Brock Purdy, we should probably never just ignore the fourth quarterback if he's a rookie on this team, and they do have Tanner Mordecai. So, the QB2 battle. We can talk about some Brock stuff if you want, although this is probably a little more nitty gritty stuff than some big picture Brock questions. But that's the headline at quarterback, I would say. Although the real headline is Brock and Ricky Pearsall, Brock in the offensive line. Brock, does he have more responsibility? Is Brock working protections? That sort of thing.
Is Brock going to run a little bit more? I think it's a very, very legitimate question, because Brock himself is pushing for some more read option stuff. Now, I'm of the school of thought everybody hears that and they freak out and they say, "Oh no, he can't. We can't expose him to more injuries." I don't think that it's necessarily something that you have to expose your quarterback to more injuries to get the benefit of a rushing threat, if that makes sense. And I'll explain right now, because it probably doesn't. But
convince me, please.
Yes. So
I don't love it, but please convince me.
And Kyle, this was the thought process when they drafted
RG3. That's what we're going to make Brock Purdy into.
No,
that's
no, no. See, as soon as they say that, everybody thinks of one extreme. Yeah,
yeah,
that end of the spectrum. But when they drafted Trey Lance, they drafted him because they believed they could develop him into an excellent pocket style quarterback. But the rushing threat, just the thought of it in the defense's mind, would allow the 49ers to play 11 on 10 football. But they would have a one-man advantage because you could, you have to account for the quarterback at all times so it could freeze a defender. And then obviously the pass game is better because of that. If you look at this quarterback roster for the 49ers, it's fascinating to me that Dobbs is a guy who can really move. And if you watch Tanner Mordecai's tape he played at multiple spots in college, but I've watched a lot of the Wisconsin tape. He could run. I mean, I think his 40 is like a 4.4 or 4.5. Like Tanner Mordecai can fly. So the slowest QB out of all these guys is Brandon Allen, because we know that Brock Purdy can move as well. Anyway, it might happen once or twice, but I would not be surprised if there was a read option play and you call it in a area where you could see that it's going to be safe, and you tell Brock Purdy, don't run into somebody, slide, don't take a massive hit. But if you can establish and put something like that on film, I think that it can unlock new levels of efficiency for the 49ers offense, because all you need in the NFL, especially with a quarterback who's as fast of a processor as Brock Purdy, especially with a 49ers team that has so many weapons downfield, all you need is sometimes to add an extra 1/10 of a second of indecision to one defender at the line of scrimmage. And that's the whole beauty of the dual threat game. You don't actually have to run the quarterback to have the dual threat, right? It's not like he has to be going out there and carrying the ball 5 or 6 times a game for that to happen. It might have to happen once every 5 weeks or once every 6 weeks. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's a threat. It's more of a threat than an actual action.
Or you never do it until the Super Bowl, and then you keep it. Right, Patrick Mahomes, right?
Or in last year's case, the playoffs, right? Or I guess, yeah, the Mahomes in the Super Bowl. But Mahomes, everybody knows Mahomes can run. He established
everyone knows he can run
early in his career.
That's
yeah,
true. But the talk on that one was on that he had never kept the ball on that play this year.
So they hadn't run that specific play until then.
He'd given it every time.
Yes, yeah. and that's what the 49ers basically bid on the play. So I get it. I guess I'm talking a little bit less about the actual dynamics of the read option and the run play and whether or not that particular play works, and more about the fact that the defense is considering that something might happen, and that in turn compromises their ability to defend the pass. And Kyle has talked about that a lot. Like the whole justification behind the potential of Trey Lance was exactly that. Lance obviously ended up not being as fast as the 49ers had hoped that he would be.
Or I think is comfortable as a runner. He looked very uncomfortable.
Exactly. So it didn't work out. We get it. And Brock Purdy did. That doesn't change the fact that Kyle Shanahan has wanted to stretch opposing defenses with the running ability of his quarterback. And that doesn't mean that he wants a quarterback that's taken off and running around like Steve Young or RG3. But I think it does mean that rushing threat can be useful. And then there's the whole off schedule portion of things, which proved to be the savior of the 49ers season last year. Brock Purdy wasn't able to deliver off schedule. They probably don't beat Green Bay. He had a huge run on the winning drive there, and they definitely don't beat the Detroit Lions. He had several big runs in that game, and now 3 of their 4 quarterbacks can all move. So it's interesting just to look at that depth chart and the skill sets there, because they can be put to good use.
What did Bill Walsh say to Steve Young after that famous stumbling Steve Young run? Like, oh, great run. It would have been better if Jerry Rice had done it.
Yeah, it would have been a little bit more efficient if you just give the ball to Jerry and watch him do it, because I think he evades defenders a little bit more gracefully than you. That being said, Steve Young evaded defenders very, very gracefully. He's got to be a top 5 running quarterback of all time. That run right there, that's one of the great plays in NFL history. Steve had the best quote about that on the 30th anniversary. I was able to write about it, and we talked about it, and Oh, it was awesome. I'll have to pop it up
Oh, that's
on the
cool.
show later. He said it was like water running downhill, flowing downhill.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
I think you made a good point. I just want to say something real quickly. In addition, in reaction to this idea of having just a mobile quarterback, kind of in the back of the Shanahan mind, I thought it was interesting, kind of eye opening, telling. There was one other quarterback drafted in the 7th round before pick 262, and it was Mike McDaniel's first draft in Miami. And as we know, Mike McDaniel's is, the run, he adopted the run game is how he attached really his value to Kyle Shanahan. And he drafted a really mobile quarterback named Skylar Thompson from Kansas State, who had, I think, 2 seasons in which he ran the ball over 100 times. That was the guy that got drafted ahead of Brock Purdy. And I thought, in hindsight, like it was just an interesting thought, Now maybe he thought other things about him, but maybe it was a little bit telling. Who knows? If Skylar Thompson was available, would the Niners have drafted him over Brock Purdy? I don't know. They seem to like Brock, and the Brian Greasy connection is pretty significant, right? Brian really liked Brock Purdy, but
another facet that this mobility at quarterback can help is inside runs. Again, the threat of the keeper, just the very threat of the keeper, creates indecision and some space on the inside. And Christian McCaffrey's weakest splits last year as a runner, he was awesome running the outside zone to the left. Trent Williams is out there. He was good running outside to the right, but the lowest yard per carry totals, under 4 yards per carry, was on inside zone runs. So,
and the Niners play some good interior linemen this year, as you always do, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And also interior linemen are becoming more and more, and we see this with somebody like Javon Hargrave, more and more pass rush oriented. So there are potential, weaknesses to exploit in the interior run game, but you do have to scheme it up, and you do have to you can't let the linebackers and the safeties all crash in on it. So that I think it all ties together. And I again, you brought up a great example with Skylar Thompson. We're looking at Tanner Mordecai. You look at Brock Purdy's quickness. You look at Josh Dobbs. All these guys have something in common. All these guys are at least a threat, and that's a threat to move, and that's a threat that can space a defense.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah, you can.
I'm not convinced. I don't like it.
You don't have to like it.
It terrifies me. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's worth it. But I get it.
I'm sure you approved, though, when you saw Brock Purdy escape and deliver, what was that, the 3rd down against Detroit that set the 49ers up to win that game. Yeah. So you see the ability there.
Totally.
And it's everything in the NFL is a balancing act, man.
If you can promise me he'll get down, well, I'll feel a little bit better about it.
Yes, and you know what the most dangerous play for his quarterback is, and this has already happened to Brock Purdy. He's already been hurt on this play. Is sitting back in the pocket like a sitting duck, and having your elbow snapped.
That's true. And, although,
yeah,
I was gonna say I've argued for years with Ryan Leaf, because I've known Ryan for a long time now.
Mm-hmm.
He's always been adamant that it's more dangerous to slide as a quarterback than it is to dive. He thinks that guys still kind of pop you, and you're just so exposed. Now, there's different kinds of dives, and he could be here to defend that case. I've argued the opposite. I'm like, no, it's crazy. You're protected as a slider. But
in theory, unless you're playing like Vontae's perfect.
Yeah.
Then protection is a very relative term. But yeah, no, the dynamics of that, and I am not sitting here saying that they're going to be, again, running this multiple times a game. This might be a couple times a season. That sometimes that's enough to get defenses to think the way that these guys study the tape. But if you zoom out and look at this in the big picture, and you remember the Hassan Reddick play where Purdy got blown up in the NFC Championship game, whatever you can do in totality as an offense to keep an opposing pass rush on its heels instead of on its toes will end up making your quarterback safer. So you want to take the steam out of an opposing pass rush. And usually in the most simple form of football, that involves a good run game. That involves keeping a defense thinking about multiple different things so they can't just pin their ears back and try to kill your quarterback. So in a roundabout way, but I think in a way that logically makes sense. Having as many threats, including one coming from your quarterback to run, can actually keep him safer because he's not going to be that sitting duck in the pocket, dropping back 32 times with edge rushers hell bent on killing him.
That's okay. I don't hate that logic.
I think that's how Kyle thinks based on talking with him over the years. Like he's never said it in like one piece like I just did.
Yeah.
That's gathering thoughts from him over the years.
Well, I mean, I do think there's probably a part of him that would prefer if his quarterback runs it's on Kyle's terms, right? It's like part of the design of the play versus the beauty of Brock.
Kyle wants to have a video game controller. Kyle wants to have a video game
but
controller, and he wants it to be Madden. But
it doesn't work that way. And I think part of the question with Brock as time goes on, and maybe he gets more responsibility. The thing you don't want if you're Kyle, it felt like Garoppolo got. And I think the narrative on Jimmy gets, sometimes we can get a little too, like somebody said to me the other day, like they made the Super Bowl despite him. Like, no, that's not what happened. But also it did feel like by the end, some of the freedom that he played with, and maybe it was related to his injury too, right? He had a significant
He became
injury.
less mobile.
He became less mobile. And so
moving around.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. If you're less mobile, you're less of an ad-libber. But what you don't want is to harness harness Brock too much, right? You don't want to do that. So he's got something in him that his teammates love, that helps your team. And because you don't get to have a controller, you need the quarterback that can go make a few plays for you, you know? So anyway, should we go to another position?
We should. Yeah. Well, I mean, we could do a whole show on this, and I'm sure
we could.
will.
We do hundreds of shows on this.
It's going to be awesome when the season starts and we could start tracking exactly how they're using him. And we'll be able to actually stop theorizing and start talking about actual plays and stuff. But I would look out for it. I'm just, that's my take on it. Just look out for it because we've seen the physical ability and we've seen some clues from Kyle Shanahan. Which position do you want to do next?
Well, I want to talk about one of the big questions at running back is I've got a few when it comes to running back. One, the preseason games are going to be huge because Cody Schrader and Isaac Guerrero, they're going to have to put their pads on, and we're going to have to find out if they can be trusted to protect, because that will be the key, right? Can you get on the field? Can you spell McCaffrey? Well, it's great to have somebody out there taking a few carries away from Christian McCaffrey, as long as it's not obvious that it's a run play when Christian McCaffrey's off the field, because Christian is the most trusted pass blocker. And then another part of that is, does that make Elijah Mitchell expendable in any way? And then I think I would add this, David. The third part is, what happens if you like all your running backs? Can you get them to practice squad? Or does somebody look too good in the regular season and they look around and go, in the preseason, and they go, I'd rather be on somebody else's team because I'm fourth on this depth chart here, even though I had a good camp and even though I had a good preseason, and I'm just not going to get on the field, and I'm on practice squad, and there's no way off a practice squad for me here. So I think there's a lot of intrigue at running back behind Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, they're potentially very deep here, but that's key word is potentially, because we have to see how Guerrero and Schrader show up. I saw some really positive things from Schrader to begin in OTAs. It seems like he has that gamer type of vision. He and Guerrero basically have opposite profiles, and that Guerrero is a superstar athlete. I mean, a lot of the measurables compared well to somebody like Saquon Barkley's, but he started, I think, 1 or maybe 2 games in college. I think maybe only 1 throughout his entire college
I think it was
career.
1, yeah.
Yeah, so not a whole lot of it.
And it might have been the bowl game. It might have been his last game or something like that. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, so basically you've got a guy that you see the profile and you're like, wow, moldable clay, great. Cody Schrader, you see the athletic profile and it might scare you because it's terrible. I mean, he
didn't get drafted.
Yeah, like a 4.7 40, maybe 4.6, but it wasn't fast. None of the metrics were good for Cody Schrader. But
for the SEC's leading rusher.
Yeah, but he was arguably the best running back in the SEC. So I see a little Trey Lance and Brock Purdy in here, right? I mean, in Lance, you had a guy. The thing with Lance, that came in the COVID year, so they didn't have the measurables that they would have had in any other year. But they thought that he would have dominated some of these measurables. They probably didn't look at the FCS tape the right way, and competition is worse there. But in theory, Lance, awesome measurables, not a lot of experience, moldable clay. 49ers said, okay, let's take a chance on him. Brock Purdy did not have great measurables except for the 10-yard split. He had everything else was like very average to below average, except he has great acceleration out of nowhere. Nobody's been able to put their finger on how that's possible. It's probably because he has really good reaction time, so he's able to get that first step out there really quick. But anyway, with Schrader, just like with Purdy, measurable's not good, but multi-year starter at the highest level of college football, and he can play the position well. Every time Adam Peters talked about Brock Purdy, he would say, yeah, this guy just plays the position well. That was the thing, is plays the position well. I don't know how many times I heard that from him, but I could feel I could apply that to somebody like Cody Schrader. And I think that he looked comfortable in OTAs. Now, that doesn't mean much, but if you add that onto the resume that he already showed in college in SEC with Missouri, I think you have something cooking here with Cody Schrader. Now with Guerendo, a lot of people probably scared now that I compared him to Trey Lance, because that obviously didn't work out for the 49ers, but there's another layer here. It's obviously a different position. Guerendo was a wide receiver first, recruited as a wideout, switched to running back. We talk about the special teams rules and the new return rules and how you're going to want big players who can also move. You're going to want like hybrids of positions, right? Guerendo's over 220 pounds and he runs a 4.3. So I think he might be perfect on one of those kick return or kick coverage units with the new rules. And the fact that he was a fairly recent like convert from receiver to running back and hadn't played all that much, I think there's still a lot of tread on the tires and a lot of meat on the bone here for them to develop. So two different types of players, but they may have two very specific and differentiated roles for both of these guys.
Yeah, maybe they add up to sort of McCaffrey. You're right. I mean, without pads on, running back minicamp is almost irrelevant. But I thought Schrader looked a lot more comfortable in terms of just seeing it and hitting it than Guerendo did. But Guerendo made some really athletic catches in the flat, back hip, turn up field, that sort of thing. The counterpoint on Guerendo as a returner would be, are these plays going to end up being more running back type plays? And does he have the vision on what will be a really crowded field, right? In theory, 53 yards of field and basically 20 people lined up face to face, all within a 5 to 10 yard stretch of 53 yards wide. So is kind of that running back skill of seeing the hole, hitting the hole, going to be necessary? But that's an interesting thought on him as a returner. And then this feeds into, and I think I always lean, not always, but in a situation like this with Elijah Mitchell, if you're saying, hey guys, Elijah Mitchell's going to maybe he's going to be a trade piece is not the right word because you're getting a 5th round pick for him, but maybe he's going to be available, expendable. Because these two rookies, maybe one of them pops, I tend to say, no, he's not. He's just, I think the likelihood that he becomes more valuable to them in a trade than to them as a player on their team is low. Unless Guerendo and Schrader are both really good and they don't feel like they can get one of them onto the practice squad.
I think that you probably wouldn't see movement here until closer to the trade deadline. Because look at what happened with Jeff Wilson. That was after Christian McCaffrey came in, and then they said, "Yep, now we have our glut here at the position." But it's really tough to evaluate running backs in camp, because especially the way that 49ers running backs play, they break tackles. They almost every year they lead the league in yards after contact per attempt. They don't tackle to the ground during practice at training camp, so the running back's key skill is not able to be displayed during these practices, which is why preseason games, I'm all about looking at the running backs, because finally they get to run through tackles. We get to see what they
behind
have.
Like half of a B team of an offensive line.
Yes, exactly. So that's August 10th, Nashville. They're playing the Titans. That's
Lombardi will be there.
I will.
Game.
I will. Yeah.
Not my home game.
I'll have to fly to the home game, but because I'll already be.
You'll be in San Francisco.
Yeah, I'll be based in San Francisco at that point. But Margot will still be here, so she's happy about it.
Another 2 United legs from Lombardi.
I need to get the 54 this year. We need to get to the 1K.
Yeah, we need a spreadsheet for that.
I do have one. I'm not going to share it though. I'm not going to get to the 54 that I need if I don't pre-plan this, and I'm barely getting there. So like if there's a flight that I can't take, I may have to be the guy that, and
Oh
I've done
no,
this
I've
before.
heard of these people.
And my roommate
Last day
in
of the
San
year,
Francisco,
cross country
Paul,
flight
did
to
it.
Boston,
No, no. Well,
2 legs, 4
he only
connections.
he only needed 2 legs. And I'm just sitting on the couch, and here goes Paul. I'm going to send this to him. He's going to get kick out of it. Sitting on the couch, and it's just like a Saturday. Normally we just hang out, and he's walking out the door. I'm like, where are you going? He's like, oh, L.A. I'm like, what? When are you coming back? He's like, I'll be back in 3 hours. I'm like, what? And he flies down to L.A., lands, walks across the terminal, gets on the plane back to San Francisco. He's like, yeah, I needed to keep my 1K status.
For people
On
who
like
don't
December
understand,
30th,
there are
yeah.
a lot. There are people like this, like Lombardi, who
First timer this year.
first timers.
First timer,
There are
yeah.
people who will, like at the end of the year, fly across country, just fly to Hawaii, and then turn around and fly back. Which,
If you have any questions, you could DM me.
yeah, actually, Lombardi's helping me get some Star Alliance points for my Portugal trip. So thank you. I'm making fun, but I actually need the help. So
if you fly enough, it's worth it because you get with 1K, you get upgraded a lot, right?
Yeah.
And even with gold, I've gotten upgraded quite a bit, and the wider seats. Watch the Steve Harvey clip on First Class. Have you seen that?
No, I don't know that I have.
We'll play it at some point later. He basically says you should treat yourself just one time to First Class, and you could get the big wide seats, the meal, the champagne, and everything, because then every single time you board the plane, after that, you'll walk by those seats and you'll start getting really, really upset that you're not sitting in them, and you'll start manifesting ways to return. So basically, I'm manifesting ways to return through my spreadsheet.
I like that.
Flights you might deem meaningless to LA on December 30th, they're not meaningless.
Not meaningless. Got it.
You know who else isn't meaningless to us? The tight ends. We believe in tight ends.
Well, so what is going to happen at tight end too, right? This is one of the big questions here.
Well, let's put it up. Let's see.
You have who do you have? Oh, you have Braden Willis.
This is not scientific. I just put names up there. I haven't, I really, really don't know what's going to happen. I'm tempted now to even nudge Willis down. I think Eric Saubert is the high floor option for the 49ers. I think Logan Thomas might actually be the higher ceiling option. He had 55 catches last year, but the question is, can he block? He didn't have to block in that system for Washington the way that he would have to block for the 49ers. Saubert's huge, by the way. I mean, we're talking, he's muscled up. And Thomas is tall. Like Thomas and Mason Pline, who might, be better than all these guys except for George Kittle after he develops, because he's got a lot of, I think, untapped potential. He freshly started playing football in 2023, came off a college basketball career. But all these guys are tall, but Sauber is, he's got the width, and he's also has the pedigree. He's been in the league since 17. That's impressive staying power no matter who you are. This is a cutthroat league. So he's been able to be that journeyman that can do the small stuff right. So if Braden Willis is, not up to par, if he doesn't make that big stride, and he had a good OTA session, he caught a lot of passes, but we didn't see the blocking in OTAs. So if Braden Willis isn't able to secure that 2 spot, I think Saubert's a high floor kind of guy. That's the way I look at it.
It's an athletic group, I would add, right? I mean, when you think about, I think you just in the back of your mind have to keep special teams in mind. Willis is athletic. Thomas is athletic. Saubert is athletic. Mason Pline, I think, is really like watching Mason Pline move. I've said this many times, but I'll repeat it because we'll talk about it in camp, especially once the pads come on. It'll be interesting to see. Does Mason Pline still have the freedom of movement once everyone's, in a preseason game, once you're getting hit and bumped and pushed and pulled? Does he display the same freedom of movement that he showed in minicamp? Because he's got, I don't want to oversell it because it's just minicamp, but all the stuff that people said about him coming out of Furman in terms of his athleticism that showed up on tape at Furman too, it looked like it translated to the field at minicamp. He can turn a corner. He can accelerate. He can bend. He's big.
I like that he got lit up at Furman, obviously early in his football career, because it hasn't been a long career, and he still caught the ball.
Well, I've told you, I think, what his college coach,
yeah,
Clay Hendricks, said, right? Which is that, And you can watch that interview on my channel, which is the scouts would ask him, do you see the basketball come out in him? And I'd tell him, no, you don't. Is he soft is the question. And he said
it's
no.
very thinly coated.
Very thinly veiled.
Soft?
And just taking a shot at basketball guys too.
Yeah.
Like,
well, there's that big debate now. I don't know who started it, but some NBA guys saying, yeah, if I was in the NFL, I'd,
might have been, was it
have
Austin
a long
Rivers
career.
maybe?
Yeah. I think it was somebody like that. But it's not, and the justification from the basketball side is always like, oh, look at our height, look at our athleticism. Football, that will win you half the battle maybe, but there's a huge part of the battle that is about grit in football. No matter how cheesy that sounds, you're not risking your life running across the middle of the field in basketball. And I get that there are rules in football now that have minimized a little bit of that, but I don't care, because just because there's a rule doesn't mean that somebody that runs a 4.3 and is 240 pounds will not hit you while you're running a 4.3 as well. And that's a car accident right there in the middle of the field. That kind of stuff doesn't happen in basketball, right? It happens in football. And to be able to perform in that set of circumstances takes a different level of crazy.
Who would you say, maybe you'll answer this the way I hope you do and help my point, in the last 10 years is the most physical NFL style high level NBA player?
LeBron is pretty.
Well, LeBron's actually, that's a good one. Yeah, and LeBron did play a little football, but I'm thinking of Draymond Green. And the reason
I was about to say Draymond because he plays more football.
Go watch Draymond Green in the Michigan State spring game. Go watch him in the Michigan State spring game. It's cool that he went out there and played in the Michigan State spring game. He's not about to be an NFL player with a few more practices. It wasn't going to pan out for him in football, which is great. He's a Hall of Fame NBA player. But it wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to work.
That's a great point. I was thinking either LeBron or Draymond. I probably
LeBron's a good one. LeBron as a receiver would have been, but people always like LeBron would be a sweet defensive end. No, he'd be a good receiver.
Well, he probably, the thing, a defensive end has changed so much over the years. Like, I don't know if I told you the story of Kyle Bell. You might have covered him in the Pac-12. He played a little bit for Oregon State back in the day, but he was my friend in high school. And this guy's huge. He was 6'4" and muscled up. And, back when I was in high school, this is 02 to 06. It was before the shift that we've seen to athleticism along the defensive line. It was just starting around that time. And so everybody would see 6'4", 220 and be like, okay, wide receiver, let's go. Our high school coach saw that and said, no, I'm going to put him at defensive end. And he's going to obliterate all these offensive tackles, put on a little bit of weight, and it's going to be an edge rusher. And we've seen that now, like over the last 25 years in the sport of football, is that even the defensive tackles, Aaron Donald just said after he retired, he was playing at 260 or 265. Imagine telling that to somebody back in 1999, that the best defensive player in the league is a tackle playing at 260 pounds. Right. So there's been this shift to athleticism. And by extension, if we want to apply this to the 49ers offense, that's why Kyle Shanahan likes to run the ball, because he's seen defenses get smaller, and that's mainly to defend the pass, either through pass rushing or coverage. So he says, I want to zag when the league is zigging, so I want to emphasize the run game. And that we might see a reversion now to more size, because it's going to be a chess match, go back and forth. But I do think that, some of these more receiver body types like LeBron, we talk about him as a receiver tight end. I think he could have, if he trained for only football, I think that there would be some coaches that would say, hey, I'm going to put him on the edge, see what happens here. Could be hard to block, that's for sure.
It would be. All right, receivers.
So this is another group that is, I obviously the top end of this, and, that's assuming everything goes according to plan with Brandon Ayuk, and you got Deebo Samuel and Juwan Jennings and add Pearsall into the mix. The top end of this is really talented. I've seen the 49ers in receiver rankings around the league. I never put too much stock in these things, but it does seem that they're a consensus number one if they have all of these guys available on the roster. Just how deep they are is going to depend on somebody like Jacob Cowing, the pick out of Arizona. It's going to depend on, some of these, does Ronnie Bell take the next step and does he force his way onto this roster? Or is Chris Conley, who, by the way, was an awesome gunner in the Super Bowl, and he made some big catches down the stretch on offense for the 49ers. Is he going to secure a roster spot? Or do they yo-yo Chris Conley between the 53 and the practice squad, kind of like they did last year? Where does Trent Taylor fall into things? I see Trent as a practice squad player who gives the 49ers a higher floor at punt returner, where you want a high floor so you don't screw things up. So it's an intriguing room to me because they are very, very strong on the top end. There's no way to deny that. But exactly how strong they are at spots 5, 6, 7, and 8, that to me is what's going to be determined at camp.
Well, Jacob Cowing's at the top of the list because we really didn't get to see him in minicamp. Hold on. I shouldn't say at the top of the list. At the top of the list is Ricky Pearsall with pads. Does Ricky Pearsall get open in NFL practice and NFL games?
Press man, yeah.
Against press man. So that's number one. Jacob Cowing, we just didn't really get to see much of in minicamp. And it may be that we don't see much of him at all this year. That's possible. And that he's the receiver that kind of redshirts this season. That'd be fine. Kyle Shanahan said it the night they drafted Ricky Pearsall. Sometimes you're making decisions now for the future. And maybe that's what ultimately has happened at wide receiver. But Cowing does have a unique skill. He's really fast. Danny Gray was supposed to be the fast guy. And I thought, for the most part, Danny had a good minicamp. But, again, no pads. And then the other thing, to go back to special teams, kind of runs through all of this stuff. Is Ricky Pearsall able to do that? If he's your fourth receiver, then you feel okay about putting him on kickoff return. But is he comfortable with it? They didn't do a lot of it in camp, but there was one where he struggled to pick the ball up. There's going to be a lot of teams kicking the ball on the ground in this new kickoff rule, I think. I think it's going to be a little bit of a fly. I think it's going to be cool. I'm excited about it. I think a little fly in the ointment of this new kickoff rule is teams are going to kick the ball like line drives on the ground. That's going to make it a little less exciting than you'd like it to be. I've mentioned this, but the XFL had a rule. One of the rules the NFL did not adopt for the new kickoff rule was in the XFL, you had to wait 3 seconds if the ball was on the ground before only the returner could move. And he had a 3-second window to go pick the ball up before everybody else could move. The NFL did not enact that part of the rule, meaning if you kick it, if you kind of squib it, right, kick a line drive over the head of the coverage teams and then have it bounce to the returner, they can start moving immediately. And it gives them a little bit of a jump start on the returner. So being able to pick the ball up in a panic situation is going to be a big part of this job. And that's where maybe Trent Taylor comes into play. So there's not many spots open, but it's probably one.
That's fascinating to me. I never thought of him as a potential kick return candidate, but you've studied these rules. I will say more than I have. So that's another angle to look at this. To me, punt return and the 49ers, I mean, they learned again the hard way in the Super Bowl. That's a play that can have disastrous results if you screw something up. And I know that was horrific luck when it hit off of Darrell Luter Jr.'s leg, but you also had the championship game against the New York Giants with Kyle Williams about 10 years back. Punt return in the league right now is a position where you have to have a high floor because the ceiling has been so limited by how good these coverage teams are. Talk about Chris Conley and the punt downing that he was doing as a gunner. That was great work. But there was a season, 2 seasons ago, it took like almost all of the regular season for the NFL to see its first punt return touchdown of the year. And it's just because the punters are so good. The directional kicking is precise. These special teams coordinators are like mad scientists charting out exactly where the coverage guys have to be to make sure that there's absolutely no return room. And in general, the coverage game is ahead of the return game on punts. So since the ceiling has been constrained, you better not have a guy that's muffing punts because then you're only losing value on punt returns. The whole adage, or it's not an adage, it's kind of people use it to, make fun of players like Trent Taylor. They're like, oh yeah, he's good for a fair catch. It's It's like that's a plus in today's NFL. When you look at the analytics, that's an absolute plus. Trent Taylor didn't muff a single punt with the 49ers in his first stretch. I think he has 2 muffed punts over his whole career, and both of them came in a rain game. So there's, especially at, for a team where that position is up in the air, Ray McLeod's gone now, having a safe option is very, very necessary. This roster is really good. You can't have punt returner screw it up.
Well, and the other thing I'll say about it, and this is not a receiver part of it, this is the, both Mitch Wishnowsky and Jake Moody, they took turns practicing in those kickoff drills that we were able to see in minicamp. Mitch is Australian. Mitch grew up playing Aussie rules football. Mitch has kind of when given the chance to be a little physical, he, more than most kickers or punters, I would say. He also,
remember his rookie year, laid somebody out.
Yes.
It was Kansas City. That's crazy.
So, but he, I think he had some shoulder injuries when he was young, which is part of why he switched from playing like full contact Aussie rules football to like a flag version. How much do kickers end up involved in these plays? I don't think it'll be as much, like the Chiefs have talked. Dave Taub is Taub, is that you say his last name? Taub, the Chiefs special teams. They've talked.
I don't know how you pronounce it.
Yeah, but you print guys. No, but they've talked about using. I always want to say Eric Reed. Justin Reed,
Stanford guy.
I think I don't, there are some rules about where the kicker can go as well, how far the kicker can advance until the kick. So, or until the ball's been touched. So I don't know if the kicker will be involved in this as much as people are worried that he might be, but that's also, I don't know what the Niners are going to, that will be an interesting thing to watch in preseason games. I just think there's a higher chance, right? And again, you've studied this more than me, but there's a higher chance this gets to the last line of defense. There is. Yeah.
Because the guys are all in one line.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of being spread out as they were before. So even if the kicker's not allowed to advance as quickly far up the field, I see the Chiefs thinking Reed is a safety, last line of defense. Having a safety there is better than having Harrison Butker there. So it'd be great if you had just another guy that could kick, but they don't. So yeah. Well, I still remember wishing Chris Conley kick. Chris Conley can do a lot of stuff, by the way. He could block. He could run that corner route. That corner route that he ran against Green Bay was clean. I mean, Purdy put that ball right where it had to be. But he ran a good route against the Rams too. He had a good game against the Rams. I can't believe I mentioned this now 3 times in the show, but the gunner work that Chris Conley did in the Super Bowl, we'd still be talking about it much more if they had won that game. That was instrumental in that game. You were going to make a Wishnowsky point that I interrupted. I believe 2019 was his first season, and it was 2019 preseason week. I want to say week 3 at Kansas City. He just absolutely decked somebody on kick coverage. And I still remember it. I still remember like all the reporters the next week going up to him in the locker room because like, we never seen a punter do that to anybody. So that stuck with me. I remember when he was at Utah, which is a physical football program. Kyle Whittingham's a physical coach, a lot of physical players. He ran a fake punt that I think he called. He got the first down and then immediately undid all his good work because he got a celebration penalty very intensely, like spinning the ball down. And Kyle Whittingham was screaming at him. So, he had, it wasn't a celebration penalty, but he called his own fake punt for the Niners this past year. Yeah. And it got called back. I think Aaron Banks had some kind of holding. That's right. That's right. So he's had that twice. That's insane. But Kyle Whittingham said after the game, he was really mad at him. And then he said after the game, in Aussie rules football, you're allowed to do that stuff. He didn't know. You think about it, the kickers spend all their time just doing their own thing. No one probably ever tells them, hey guys, no spinning the football anymore. Yeah, they see some of this highlight stuff and they figure, okay, I made the big play, and he's got a competitive streak to him is the point, which maybe you would say everybody in the NFL has a competitive streak. But anyway, have we covered all the positions? Well, not use check. Fullback. Well, I'm opening the floor to you right now. I'm a big Kyle Juszczyk guy. Let's not pretend that I'm not, but I think you like talking about Kyle Juszczyk. You have your evergreen Kyle Juszczyk point.
I do.
You made it a couple weeks ago. So.
Yeah, I make it a lot. And I just think he's harder to replace than people think. And I don't know, maybe it's not than people think. I just think it's very difficult to replace him. He does so many things well. He catches the ball athletically. You don't have to hit him in stride with a perfect throw in order to take advantage of that play that you spent all week scheming up to get him open. He knows the offense very well. He directs traffic. If you've got him back there with a rookie running back, or if Ricky Pearsall's in the wrong spot, he's a second set of eyes for Brock Purdy. We saw him do it with Jimmy Garoppolo. He's a very good blocker. I think if you go watch a Niner game and you just watch him, watch how often Juszczyk is running. Everyone else is going one way, and he's running the other way. And what generally it means is he is running through a fire of people running past him. Often he's running into the fray as well. But, I definitely I'm partial to him. There's no question. So I acknowledge a little juice bias. But I also think fundamentally, people are always looking for the next version of him. And you should be. The Niners should be. Like, it's just the natural order of things. But this ain't the year.
And that's a testament to just how much of a professional he is to be. I mean, he's getting older every single year, but there has been no decline. 49ers keep on bringing him back. I mentioned when we did talk about him the last time that he took the pay cut, and I'm not so sure that he had to. I think that if he wanted to play hardball with the 49ers, they might have been stuck in a tough spot there, but he voluntarily did take that pay cut, and that's another team move from Kyle Juszczyk. He also had the highest average depth of target of any running back, anybody coming out of the backfield in the NFL last year. And then he retweeted me. I put that up there, and he retweeted me today, and he said deep threat with he flexed, flexing. He's caught deep passes for the 49ers. So you can't say that he's not a deep threat.
He's just got to get that, that when they give him that ball, there's always like, oh, 1st and goal on the 1. Let's try juice first. And it's failed a couple of times, and you can tell he really wants it when it happens. So
what they need to do is he needs to line up and run a quarterback sneak. And
I agree.
Then, instead of the fullback dive.
That actually is a thing to, like the Niners were very good at quarterback sneaks with Jimmy. Brock got hurt on one last year
against Minnesota.
So, and that is actually a thing to watch this year. Is what do they do in those spots? You want your quarterback to be able to do it, right?
Well, Brock, right after the injury, Brock was playing again, but Juszczyk ran the sneak. It happened at least once, maybe twice.
Which is fine.
Cincinnati, yeah.
But it's not. The quarterback takes a million snaps in the offseason, practices it over and over.
Of course.
The fullback doesn't, right?
But Brock did come back and run. I thought that his track record was close to perfect on the sneak down the stretch once they deemed that he is okay to be running these again. They didn't want to put him right back in that spot right after he was concussed against the Vikings. So, I mean, I think that was one thing that Brock really learned from Garoppolo, and Garoppolo probably learned from Brady, right? That was passed down was the efficiency of the quarterback sneak. It's not easy. We've seen guys just run into a brick wall, even if it's blocked well, because you just have to know how to contort your body, and you have to know how to you have to take the snap cleanly, which is not easy in a big scrum. Mitch Wishnowsky might be good at that. Speaking of scrums, I don't know. I don't know a lot about Australian.
I couldn't actually tell you the difference between Aussie rules football and rugby, but sure.
Sure. If there's a scrum in there, then there's a scrum. But I just think that's the kind of thing that Mitch Wishnowsky would be really good at, just like knowing him and knowing his attitude. Yeah. A punter who's willing to lay people out would probably be good at a quarterback sneak. So, but anyway, that's not something they're going to do. Don't worry. They're not going to run Mitch Wishnowsky. When we started this show talking about them running Brock Purdy, people probably think you think I'm crazy at this point. I've advocated for that and for Mitch Wishnowsky taking quarterback sneaks. That's just about where we are with this, but that also, I think, wraps it up, right?
Yeah, we won't see any sneaks in camp from Brock Purdy in the preseason. So that does wrap
No.
it up. All right. That's this. Good job, everybody. Everybody involved. Thanks for being here. And David, good to see you. Until next time.
Yeah, see you out on the field. Camp is coming up.
Like the video, subscribe. Appreciate y'all on the podcast. Check out heyguy.co. That is where you can sign up to be notified when hats, both the 262 and the Hey Guy hats, go on sale. It'll be there. Looking forward to sharing that with you. Also, appreciate the sponsor, CIRCA Survivor, CIRCA Million. Biggest pro football contest in Vegas are back. 2 contests, both massive. Enter one, enter both, whatever. CIRCA Million, $6 million in guaranteed prizes. You pick up to 5. No, you pick 5 games per week against the spread. Whoever did the best at the end, they win it all. And there's quarterly and season-long prizes. And the entry that does the worst gets a booby prize of $100,000. There's also CIRCA Survivor, which is $10 million guaranteed pot to the winner or winners. You pick 1 game a week. Try to go undefeated as long as you can. Last year, 4 winners split $9.2 million. That made it the largest legal football contest in history. So they're going to make history again because it's going to be even bigger. You got to enter in Nevada before the football season starts. So you go to Reno, you go to Henderson, you go to Vegas. Niners, Raiders playing Vegas this year in the preseason. I'll try and be there for that. We'll see if that's going to work out. But you go there to sign up, and then you sign up. They get you set up with a proxy, and then you can play from anywhere. It's a contest. You can do it from anywhere. Go to circasports.com, click on contest. All right.